Cal, how you doing? Welcome to the platform.
Thanks, man. Thank you so much for having me, brother.
Now, this is important, you're running for a criminal court judge, Division 3.
I'd like to think so. That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And so 8 years.
Yeah, man.
Possibly.
Yeah.
So we got to talk about that.
Yes, we do. Shoot, was a lot of time.
Right.
Yeah.
And before we get into that, for those who might not know who Cal is, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure.
Originally from Richmond, Virginia.
Correct.
Came here, went to Fisk. Tell us a little bit about that. Just not the whole journey, because give us an abbreviated. Give us an abbreviated, just who Cal is.
Well, I've spent half my life in Nashville. I got here when I was 18, 2001, to go to Fisk University, which I always say is one of the best decisions I ever made. I left to go to law school for 3 years in Des Moines, Iowa, and came back in 2009, and have been here, starting my criminal defense practice, from having no clients to having many clients now. My work is mostly criminal defense, if not all, but I started getting pro bono work, which is clients that could not afford to hire an attorney that the judge would appoint me to. And so through that, I built a successful private practice and have worked for the last 3 years as a judicial magistrate until I resigned so that I could run for office.
Wow, that's a lot. And I want to get on that magistrate because
I know
bail,
yeah,
bail and cash
fair.
money back. This is big.
Yeah.
Man, how did Fisk change your perspective on things? Being in the city of Nashville, civil rights, all these historical prominent figures coming through, for just the work in the community that Fisk represents.
Yes, it gave me audacity. It dared me to do as much as I thought I could and then try to find a further place to go. When you're walking in the same hallways and places as Du Bois, Diane Nash, John Lewis, you cannot but help to feel a sense of pride just simply being there,
right.
And who you are and what your trajectory is going to be. I don't know if any Fisk guy can say they weren't really kind of defined or shaped by the time they spent at the university. And so Fisk, I always say, although small, it's got a huge global impact. And, I couldn't remove that from me and my thought process and psyche about everything, going forward.
Man, what was your family, your friends, your close peers say about Cal growing up in Richmond, Virginia?
That dude's running for judge. I was, class clown. I was, the fun guy, the good friend. I'm an only child, and so, I would say I treat my friends like brothers and sisters, because it was just me and my mom. My dad passed when I was 10, and so growing up, friendship was everything to me. And I've got just some incredible lifelong friends, from elementary school. And so, what they would say now is how proud they are of me and that they're really happy that things worked out. And so, but it's funny kind of going back, seeing teachers and stuff like that, I did a little hair raising, but nothing crazy, but just I was to see kind of now where things are, it shows kind of the wide depth I'd like to say I've got,
Right. And how did Richmond, Virginia build your character? Because this is my introduction to Richmond.
Yeah.
Coach Carter. That's my introduction to Richmond, Virginia, right? And so you see that and say, oh wow, that can be a tough place to grow up.
Okay, so here, quick little spot check. That's California, right?
Okay.
Richmond, Virginia had some. One of the things that was really instrumental is Monument Street. I don't know if you've heard about that, but one of the biggest things that was happening when I was there was this uproar about Andrew Ashe being added to Monument Avenue. Monument Avenue was one of the most famous roads, very similar to like a Broadway or a Poplar in Memphis, but it was this avenue that had nothing but Confederate generals in huge statues. It's very famous now from the Black Lives Matter movement that they took it down. That's that very famous one with the guy on the horse that was taken down. That was one of the major Confederate generals, and to now kind of see, you talk about something that you would never imagine happening in your lifetime. Monument Avenue was just synonymous with Richmond, Virginia. And this idea that in the time that I've been alive, to think about, just how embedded that was to now having seen it removed,
Right.
it's fascinating. And so Richmond was transformative in that, obviously I found myself, I had a great upbringing, right? I was very fortunate with my mom. She was the breadwinner. And so even when my dad passed, a lot of things changed, obviously, but my way of life was consistent. And so, she raised me right. And so I was able to find outlets, find friends,
Right.
participate in things like Jack and Jill,
Right.
very involved with church. I grew up Episcopalian, and so I was first server, second server, and thurifer, the guy with the incense, like you see. And so,
Wow.
Richmond was really, really great. Not a lot of stuff to do for a kid, but I made do.
Right.
So yeah.
What inspired you or drew you to the criminal legal system?
So it's funny. I knew from the very beginning, I wanted to help people. Initially, my goal was more consumer protection. Like one of the reasons, like I went to law school was just kind of this idea of these big, huge corporations, that make you sign these little end-user license agreements for like cell phones and stuff like that. I wanted to help the little guy.
Right.
Then I get to law school, and one of my professors in in consumer protection, and said that, she's got one case that took 7 years before it's settled. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, let's do some reevaluation. In law school, took some advanced criminal procedure classes and did well. And so didn't really know at the time that I had an aptitude for it, but just kind of those things made sense. Came back to Tennessee, took the bar, and started working at a personal injury firm with LaVelle Glanton, actually, because that's who I interned for when I was here in college over the summer. And, I was having a good time. It was fun, but just there was something missing. I didn't get to go to court as much as I'd like. Mm-hmm. And so after about a year, I started going up to the Birch Building just to get cases, because I realized one of the benefits, one of the things I'm really good at is oral advocacy, right? Which is kind of talking with people, communicating.
Right.
And, those first few months, I like to joke, wife and I had a new baby on the way, right? I have left this job to now go start on my own, and I remember that first year, man, maybe I made, $2,000 to $4,000, just from appointed work, because,
wow.
When
the
I
whole
say
year.
Here in Nashville, right,
Wow.
just started from nothing, right?
Right.
Because you got to go up there, you've got to ingratiate yourself with the judges, you've got to appear competent and be competent so that they can give you cases,
Right.
Had a lot to learn, but through kind of successfully representing clients, being consistent, getting favorable judgments, and,
Right.
then my practice grew. And
Right.
so, but what happens is, when you start in that crucible of pro bono appointed work,
Right.
you really are helping and talking with some of the most vulnerable people in the city,
Right.
because these are people who might be in jail on simple possessions because they didn't have the money to pay even $100 bond, right?
Right.
These are people that, heck, sometimes choose to stay in jail because they don't have anywhere else to go.
Right.
And so, you cannot help, if you're doing representation and advocacy correct, you shouldn't be able to do it without getting to know the person you're representing. And
Right.
so a lot of because they don't know me from John, right? So I'm this new guy coming in and like, oh, I'm your lawyer. You've never met me before, but I've got your back, right? And everything
Right.
you say to me is going to be kept between us. Well, that's a hard dynamic for someone who has maybe had lawyers that weren't so great before. That's hard for someone who is, this idea of, okay, I'm being paid by the state to represent you, but I'm not in league with the state, right? I am
Right.
still only your advocate. So a lot of kind of misconceptions and barriers had to be broken, and in those conversations is where I learned a lot about the people I was representing, the impact that this criminal justice system has had, and so it really, once I got it, I was hooked. And
Right.
so, because I knew that Okay, it might not be consumer protection, but I can be someone's champion. I can be
Right.
someone's advocate and use the gifts and blessings that God has given me to help someone who is more vulnerable.
What changes in your perspective did you see once you got into the criminal defense side of it? Because you talk about that dynamic, and you're working with people who won't be able to afford an attorney or the indigent defense, and so now you're getting to look at like what justice may or may not be like for particular people.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? This, first off, dignity and humanity. You know, it broke my heart sometimes, just the things that, like, well, I appreciate you speaking to me as an equal, right? I appreciate you talking with me and explaining to me this process, or just understanding that, you know, I was in a bad spot and still wanting to help despite what has been done. And I'm thinking, well, you know, every attorney should be like that, you know, and saying, like, you know, like, they're thanking me for what I think is the bare minimum someone should be doing.
Right.
And so that's, to your question, kind of what opened my eyes that, you know, there are so many different entries into the criminal justice system, whether it's law enforcement or whether it's, you know, if you're fortunate enough to be able to go to jail and post the bond to get out, but then might not be able to hire a lawyer, to get a lawyer that isn't really trying to listen to you or do what you want, or daring to go to court by yourself and hoping that, well, because you think the case is simple, or that, you know, this didn't happen and you're innocent, you know, but then being rejected by judges or court officers for any number of things. And so, you know, it's those conversations and then just living it, right? Because, you know, I am running for judge in Davidson County, but I've been to 90%, or I've represented someone in 90% of all the counties in Tennessee, right? You know, I've gone as far as Memphis and as far as Knoxville, you know, and so I've seen kind of firsthand, you know, the advancements that Davidson County has and some of the things that they are very good at compared to a lot of other things. And I've seen kind of how bad it can get in some of these other smaller counties, that even with good representation, you are fighting not just a person or a judge, but a whole system that was designed even before I was hired to keep you behind the eight ball.
Let's talk about this system, right? Because I think that's what a lot of people want to trying to figure out. How can we change the system? How can we reimagine, reconstruct some of the things that have historically been in place that affect primarily Black and brown and poor folks?
Sure.
Potentially being a criminal court judge for 8 years, how do you see your role in being able to pivot into some new things that the system is just, you know, not doing very well? You know, how can we get away from things being so discriminatory and create these disparities, you know, again, primarily on Black and brown folks and poor folks that, you know, just can't, like, afford it, can't bond out, can't get the right representation, feel like they're being targeted, right, by our criminal legal system. All of these things. How does you taking this step into, you know, potentially being a judge or criminal court play into all of those things?
I think the first thing, it starts with acknowledgement, right? You know, there are some people that would hear what you just said and would think you're on a different planet, or that that's not the case. Daring this concept of justice is blind. You know, I say, yeah, justice has got to be real blind, because there are a lot of things happening in the name of justice that, you know, with someone peeking or looking, should notice these disparities, that people of color are inherently more tied to the criminal justice system, and that people without means are much more negatively affected for the exact same offenses, just simply because they don't have the money to pay for it, or to be able to live their life in a way to where they could still go to work and still be able to come to court, as opposed to staying in custody.
Right.
You know, 8 years, right? And I'm thinking, why 8? You know, because change is slow, it's grueling work. And if you can, but change is worth it. Change is difficult, but change has to be steadfast and focused. One of the things as a criminal court judge, and for any judge, is that to know the law, okay, stay current on the law. Well, again, I think that's the bare minimum, right? Obviously, you need to know the law. But I think that this idea of justice being blind in an attempt to take out the human part of justice to kind of make these judges robots, I think that on one end, I understand that concept and this belief that, okay, if I'm blind and I just do exactly what the law says, then the results have to be equal.
Right.
But it is a fact that any bright line rule or anything that applies to everybody is going to statistically affect black and brown folk more, right? That's just a fact.
Just a fact.
Okay. So as judge, especially criminal court, a lot of things would have already happened before you come to my court, But what could I do? Understanding that the many people that are coming to court, okay, it would be on the judge, I think, to make sure that all of the attorneys representing their clients are competent based on what the charge is and based on what the needs of the defendant are, okay? That seems like a very simple thing, but that's quasi-radical. This idea of a judge understanding and making sure, because, attorneys will ask for cases or want to be appointed, and, if they don't feel like doing the extra work, or if they don't want to do the research or understand that, okay, that yes, you can have this case, but you have to treat this case the same way you would if someone gave you $1 million.
Right.
So often, my clients would be talking with me and saying, okay, well, what if I can pay you, or what if I can do this? And I would always say, look, you don't have to worry about that part, right? You are going to get the best I have no matter what, because I wouldn't be your attorney if I wasn't going to do my best.
Right.
And so being a defense attorney, I'd like to think I know what that looks like. I'd like to think that I understand that.
Right. You bring up something, a fascinating thing too. That is, I guess, might be kind of radical, because we hear in the community about judge-appointed attorneys and them not being adequate enough to really represent, the case that they've been given to, the client that they've been appointed to. Right. And it kind of can seem like a conflict of interest, right? Sure. Okay, so the judge that I came is going to appoint me an attorney that he or she may have some type of relationship with. Who knows what that may be? Who knows what's happening on the side? And so to hear you say that you're going to basically have hold accountability.
Well, and I am inspired by the public defenders of this amazing county. I mean, because I tell you this, there is a bad rap about public defenders in film and TV, whatever, but that does not apply here in Nashville. I tell you, these people are working tirelessly, and under Martisa Johnson's leadership, she has demanded and required that, Judge, we can't have 100 cases and then call ourselves effective. It is unfair to us to be just given and pushed all of these cases under the name of justice or expediency, And so what happens is, while she can champion it for her team and for the people under her office, it's not the same for if someone is a conflict, because a good example is 2 people are arrested, okay? Public defender will get 1. Well, because the public defender has, that whole office is now conflicted. So now the judge has to look for an attorney who is willing to take the case, right? And again, there are a lot of amazing attorneys that are seeking work and want to help. One of the big things is, and I talk about, is the mental health, right? Especially for people of color, they are very hesitant to go and seek treatment, to even try to get an understanding of what's happening. Right. But so often I will have a client who they get in trouble, and the first thing the family says is, we've known something was wrong. We've known something was up, that he needed help, but just, didn't get to it, didn't want to. And now we're looking at this defense and saying, okay, well, clearly this person has a diminished capacity because of some type of mental health illness, and there is no record of it.
Right.
And so it's hard work, and so I'd have to go and create a record. I'd have to go make sure I could get them into the services that would benefit them because, again, the criminal justice system has been limited to, a little bit of jail time, a lot of jail time, or a whole bunch of probation, know. And none of that addresses what might be the root causes for the behavior that got them there in the first place.
Right.
And so, not to just pick on the attorneys, but you've got to know how to do that. You've got to know where to find them. But to bring it back to judge, and this is the other kind of radical idea is, I said that the bare minimum for a judge is to remain knowledgeable of the law, right? So sure, check. But I also think a judge needs to do more. Like one of the things that I am going to be doing is welcoming vendors and talking with providers of different services for all walks of life, right? It's not going to be any type of limitation. I'm going to just want to hear and know about it. A lot of times now, the judges will kind of sit and be waited to be presented information about what the defense attorney or the state believes is happening. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to research or be getting too involved in the case beforehand, but people will know that if you come to my court, there will be a slew of options available. That at least the access, because that's part of the problem too. It's the access. It's there for the people that can afford a good attorney who's been practicing, who knows how to do it. But that shouldn't be the case for the people who don't, right? Because everybody should be able to have those same services for the criminal justice system.
How do we, because once they get to you, a lot of stuff has occurred, like you said. What role can you play or be at least an advocate for as judge to prevent community members from just being victims at all, right? 90% of people come home. A lot of stuff happens before they get to you. Before we get to before they get to you, how can we stop them to getting to you in general? And what role could a judge play into that, or somebody that has your kind of decision making power play into, like, hey, I don't even want to see, I want my courtroom to be empty, ideally, right? How can I be a part of that?
It's funny that, if we are all doing the job correctly, that hopefully in a century from now we won't be needed, and so that's a very lofty goal and a dream. But again, I think what happens is, there are 6 criminal court judges that cover Davidson County, okay? And depending on the day you are arrested is what determines which judge you go in front of. It's that simple. It's kind of a 2-week rotation. And so if you look at kind of a judge like an individual island, meaning that, whatever the cases are that come directly to them, they kind of have sole jurisdiction on and can affect, it gets out. The judge sets the pulse. If you've got a judge that is tough, that is, leans to the prosecutorial side, the people in the courtroom know that, right? The probation officers of that judge know that. Law enforcement know that. And so they push the envelope. They may overcharge. They may set a higher bond. They may do all of these things under the belief that, well, this judge is going to, this is this judge's thought process. This is this judge's psyche, okay? A lot of the things that I would be doing as judge, I don't have to call out or say. It would just be understood. Like I could, because a judge, you try your best not to want to step in, right? If the judge is handling it, that means that there is a disagreement between the parties, and that's why we have judges, right? And so you want to make sure not to be too influential, but you can set a tone and understand that, like, okay, well, Judge Parks isn't going to go for that because we know that because we've seen that. Judge Parks isn't, and it was very easy to be pro-law enforcement. It was very easy to be put people in jail, tough on crime. That was, everybody got behind that, And now what we've seen is this shift in kind of with the opioid epidemic, we realize, so locking everybody up isn't the way to treat addiction, right? Presuming that people who can't find help the first time, well, we gave them one chance, let's just let them go away, And I think that if it gets out and they see, what it's like in my courtroom, they will understand that, okay, he's going to ask these questions.
Right.
He's going to want to make sure these bases have been covered. And, and it's impossible sitting there trying to think about kind of all the different scenarios.
Right.
But having been a defense attorney for over a decade, it's rare that it's going to be something that I've not seen or would come up in front of me.
Right.
But I understand that the difference would be the involvement, and because again, I am duty bound to keep Davidson County safe.
Right.
And so the decisions I make, I understand and should be scrutinized by everybody who lives here.
Right.
That doesn't mean I can't ask different questions. That doesn't mean I can't have alternative thinking and how best to do that.
Right.
And so, I go back to audacity. I go back to this idea that, we have tried these things and we've seen where we've gotten. And I think we can all agree that criminal justice reform is needed. Some people found out through George Floyd, others have known for a very, very long time that things have to be different. And so, I'm just going to say, I tell people that, I want to be judged because I believe I can make a difference. I believe that, because I care, I know the intricacies and some of the traps that happen, right? But I don't have to be a judge, right? I'm a really good attorney.
Right.
And so I'm not going to be up there worried or second guessing that, someone could come and get me or someone, because if I get up there and do what everybody else is doing, then what is the purpose of me running? Right? If I get up there and you can't distinguish me from what has already been, then I've wasted my time and everyone else's.
Right.
And so, it's this daring to do something different, being guided by faith, guided by a belief that I want to do the right thing for everyone.
Right.
Understanding, like you'll see that my slogan is balance the scales of justice.
Right.
And what I mean by that is we know and acknowledge that certain people in front of this system have been impacted and affected more.
Right.
Just acknowledging that is such a key battle and difference in what has been said before.
Right.
We also know that victims' rights in certain cases are not being as loud as they should be, particularly domestic violence.
Which is like 50% of crime here in the city.
That's absolutely correct. And I might jump ahead on you, but working as a magistrate, I did it during the pandemic. And you would just be, heartbroken at this. Everyone's at home. Nobody's out, so crime goes down. But I tell you, domestic violence skyrocketed.
Wow.
And that was my very kind of eye-opening experience of just both sides, a different side, because I would see these women, who'd come in with 2 black eyes and needs assistance to get up to the window to even tell me what happened, for then, one reason or another, for that case to be dismissed 15 days later, And so I understand that on both ends, work needs to be done, and then the quickest form is that nobody wants to be in my court, right? Whether you are a victim or a defendant, nobody wants to be in criminal court, okay? But if you are there, what can we do to make sure you still have your personhood, to make sure that your dignity and humanity, because you've not lost any of that just simply being accused for a crime, and as a victim, your voice has to be amplified as well to make sure that balance happens.
You brought up some very critical points, I think, of it got me thinking, got my mind percolating a little bit. And I think it's a powerful quote. If I'm not going to do something different that's already, happening, why should I run? Right? And so you do have an opponent. You do have an incumbent.
I do.
What have you seen or haven't seen from the incumbent that gives you that drive, that gives you that confidence, that knowing like we do need something different for the next 8 years here in Nashville that is not happening?
Going back to the justice is blind, and that if I follow the law the way I see fit, that whatever the result, then I've done the right thing. I think that that is so limiting as an analytical process. I think that the treatment of substance abuse, particularly mental health, is not focused on enough with respect to punishment or even supervision. You know, a judge can get lost in the weeds getting into the why, but because of the disparities, because of the things we know are happening, we have to ask different questions, right? You know, like we're talking about a system that's over 200 years old, and there are some really, really great things about it, but now that we have seen the impact it's had as the system as it's designed now, you know, if we don't do anything different, it will stay the same. Right. I think that the biggest thing is just this lack of care, a lack of compassion,
right.
An understanding that whoever is in front of you still requires and demands dignity, humanity. I think that, you know, the court has gotten cold.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that, we're going to be buddy-buddy with the judge.
Right.
But it's already a stressful place. It's already a nerve-wracking instance to be in court.
Right.
And so the energy you exude, right? You are still a public servant above all else, right? You are a public servant to the very person that you're going to be sentencing.
Right.
And I think that that impact and that power can sometimes be lost with respect to the decisions that are made.
Right.
You know.
Do you feel like with the incumbent now, and you talk about justice a lot, the scales of justice, right? Do you feel like it's been more of a justice system or more of a punishment system?
I think that if the only options are, you know, I talk about, so you give someone a $50,000 bond, okay? They can't make it, so they're in jail, all right? They're talking with their lawyer. They say, hey, you know, if you want to get out, they'll let you out, but you got to take 10 years of probation, okay? Well, this person might have had a job. This person might have been working. This person probably had a family, probably had someone that was depending on them, and can afford to stay here for the next 6 weeks waiting on another court date, hoping or maybe thinking that something would change. There is a lack of analysis with what could be done specifically for this person that might be better attuned to make sure that their recidivism can stay low. Because we look at recidivism kind of globally on a macro scale, you know, and kind of recidivism rates are high. Well, you know, it will be impossible to try to apply something that works for everybody, because this is when the individuality of the defendant is most important. You know, I say that the whole system, right, was developed for the person accused for the crime. Everybody else are players. But there, you know, the rules are about what the defendant should get or not get that would make it fair. You know, with respect to punishment, I think that all goes back to what you've heard, the war on drugs, you know, these, you know, they were called super predators, and one of the big kind of misconceptions are, you know, the treatment of the justice system for people that have committed violent crimes versus non-violent crimes. You know, I don't believe you should get 94 years in jail for a non-violent offense, because in Tennessee, if you killed someone in cold blood, you'd be looking at 51 years.
Right.
And so we talk about these numbers in decades in time, you know, and there are violent people out there, and there are people that, unfortunately, the only end game for them is going to have to be custody, right? I'm not coming in here saying that, you know, I believe it's all sunshine and rainbows.
Right.
But this idea that in order for the community to be safe, or in order to show the impact and the power of the justice system, that the more people that are locked up or the more people that are on probation as a kind of litmus test for it being successful is very flawed. You know.
Well, we know that statistically, right? We locking up more people than anybody.
In a first world country, yeah.
And crime still exists.
Come on.
And it hasn't decreased.
Yeah.
Right? Justice. Keep going back to this word justice. What does that mean to you? I know it's a loaded question.
No, that's fine. It's just it's heavy. Yeah,
it's heavy. What does that mean, and what does that look like? Because I think that's important for Nashville community members to know, especially for voters to know, what does justice look like to that person that could potentially be on that bench in Division 3, criminal court judge. I need to know what he or she think what justice is and what that looks like.
Justice has to be equitable, okay? Which is different from equality, right? I think for the longest time, equality was kind of this test used for justice, but each person that comes in is different, right? You think of an example like, if Bill Gates comes to court, he could be given a bond of $10,000, okay? And then someone else comes to court, Joe Blow off the street, they get a bond for $10,000. Well, that's equal, right? But none of the factors of who that person is, where that person is from, I think are asked in a sense that could make it equitable. It's going to require a lot of work. It's going to require a lot of walking on lines that are razor edge sharp because, again, with this balance, it's not saying that, these people are going to be able to come in and get more benefit from the judge because traditionally they have been underserved. But it does mean that with that acknowledgement and understanding, asking more questions and going deeper, and what works best for justice to be achieved for this person might be completely different for someone else. And that's not bad or unequal, it's just different. And different is okay if it's purpose-driven, if it's knowledgeable. Difference is okay if there is a focus on the person and what makes things better for everyone, not just the defendant, but for the victim as well, or whatever the incident may be.
Right. I want to go back to your magistrate days.
Sure.
As a judicial magistrate. And you get into looking at people's different circumstances. And this is where I think money bail, cash bail.
Sure.
And there's been a lot of talks about what that looks like reform around that. Some people believe there should not be a price amount attached to a human body in general in our criminal legal system. I know from the state of Tennessee, well, I think actually is the state of Tennessee, I think the Constitution of Tennessee actually is just like, hey, everybody has a right to a bail. However, similar offenses, similar criminal backgrounds could have drastically different bail amounts. And some people just don't understand how magistrates are usually the ones making those bail judgments and giving down those bills. That's not usually what judges do a lot of times. Walk us through that process and help us make sense of how Jerome and Kyle could have similar offenses, similar criminal backgrounds, but have like your bail could be $10,000, mine could be $20,000 or $30,000. Like, how does that happen? How does that work out?
So one of the things with bail is, and one of the most important things to remember, is that bail is not meant to be punitive. Right? And I believe for a long time it was. That might not have been the intention, but that was the impact, that it became punitive, meaning that, you can't set a bond for someone believing that they won't be able to make it as a driving force as to why you've set it so high.
Right.
Now, I want to give Davidson County some props because I started on as a magistrate in 2018. And there was a push and a drive to lower or to not just keep kind of the status quo for bond amounts. And it's a tricky business because, of all the magistrates, they are at the time when they are over that case, they're kind of like, many judges, and so the system isn't going to work if someone's coming in second guessing and checking after them each and every time a bond is set. But there is no register for, okay, if you get this crime or this charge, the bond's going to be this amount.
Right.
And I think that that's good if all of the right questions are being asked. I think that now in that scenario where, okay, same charge, similar background, but a wide gap in bond amounts, I think those are those implicit biases, or maybe those unnoticed bias that people have about being able to relate or see maybe themselves or see their grandchildren that have not had any pushback or not have any forced level of understanding to say, hey, is this happening? Am I doing this? A lot of times, the questions are written out the factors, right? Are you from Tennessee? Right? That's a huge thing, right? And if you are from Tennessee, how long? Do you have community ties to this state or this town? All right. Was someone hurt in what you did? Because that's also because, we talk about keeping Davidson County safe, but also we have to keep the alleged victim safe as well.
Right.
This is when I go to the trying to find alternatives, right? Because, if someone is charged with a violent crime or something heinous, then the idea is, okay, that deserves a higher bond, or a bond that is so high that you have to bring in source of income to show that it's not, the money you're using to get out isn't ill-gotten gains, okay? But that, again, is limited to, can you raise this money or can your family afford this money, And judges traditionally have been hesitant to lower bonds or to give a low bond on violent offenses. That seems counterintuitive to the idea that everyone is presumed innocent, right? And so the evidence presented might suggest, okay, that the state's case is strong, which is another factor as to should bail be lowered or not. But if we get into supervision, right, particularly like right now, ankle monitors or GPS monitoring, okay, it's still tough because a lot of times it's $10 a day, right, which is at least $300, and you got to pay for the bracelet. You got to, come and get checked on it.
Right.
But I think that if we can expand or find money or grants for those services, then that's a good way to have someone who is charged with something that, we want to make sure we can keep a close eye on you. However, your presumption of innocence means that, you don't have a history. And so although you've been charged with something, that would allow more space for a judge to be able to lower a bond that a family could afford, but require that, okay, while this is pending, I got to make sure, and until I see otherwise, right? And so those avenues, asking those questions, hoping to get services like that, more people involved, not just family, but objective people to hold these individual persons accountable, are a way to kind of get around this requirement that bail be skyrocketed high in order to ensure that, okay, well they're on a $250,000 bond, but someone could still pay it. And then what? They are, whatever threat they were going to be, they're still the same, even if their family could afford to get them out. And a lot of times people are motivated to come to court because that's the right thing to do. It's jumping bail or not coming to court is an issue, but I know a lot of times it's a fear of the process. I think going back to who the judge is, the tone that is set, if my court officers are respectable to the people that are there, if my staff understands that, we are better than no one here. And even as the judge, no person who comes before me is worse off or better than I am. I think people will feel better about the process. Because again, I've said, it's already crappy to be in criminal court, right? Now, whatever way you slice it, it's going to be tough. But I think that, again, you've got that, and then this belief that, well, they don't care about me. All they want to do is lock me up, or they're going to talk funky to me because of some question I may have or some this and that, And I believe that that's where, as a judge who controls that courtroom. You figure in those four walls, you know, you are king or queen. And so, but your temperament, your ability to not be quick to anger, your ability for understanding, your ability for knowing how a multifaceted group of people of all races, all backgrounds might act or respond, and not use your own psyche and beliefs that, well, if someone's acting like this, that must mean that we've got to handle them harshly or do something else. And I think that's just that shared experience of just kind of having known what it's like. You know, you feel like crime is a young person's game. Statistically, younger people are in trouble more, you know? And so I talk about, you know, being 19 years old and one night, one day, one event will shape and change the rest of your life. And so you need someone that understands that weight, that has spoken to the mothers and fathers and family members and pleaded and begged for some type of help, for some semblance that my son or daughter matters and that they aren't just going to be thrown away.
Speaking of community and diverse community here in Nashville, I like to say we diversely segregatedly diverse. That cultural competence, right, is important, I think, to have for any elected official, especially a judge, when you may be seeing people from all different backgrounds, skin tones, ethnic groups, religious backgrounds, who knows. How have you, you know, as a criminal defense attorney, right, being able to tap in and stay connected, right, with different parts of Nashville, and how do you continue to do that if judge here in Davis County?
I tell you, you know, one of the parts, so I'm a first-time candidate, right? So I've not run for anything like this before in my life. The highlights of the campaign has been the engagement from everyone, you know, black community, white community, I was just yesterday at this amazing New Rise Festival for Kurdish Pride.
Kurdish New Year.
You know, that ability to be out and engage with people and have them see someone who, you know, outside of a black robe, right? One of the things that I'd like to do is, especially with the youth, we all know that in 2017, 2018, youth violence spiked, particularly gun violence among youth, okay? Well, if a child comes to my courtroom, you know, they are already in big trouble, right? You have been classified as an adult, you know, which means that, you know, a violent crime is attached. And the first time we are engaging is when you're seeing me in the black robe. I think one of the things that could change that is going out to the church they attend, to the programs they attend, because there are so many amazing people who are trying to reach these lives and touch them before something horrible happens. You know, and I hope not to sound gloatful, but just could you imagine a criminal court judge going to talk to them before, maybe after they've gotten suspended, right, for something stupid. I
think that makes perfect sense.
And then seeing and say, hey, look, now you see me in the polo, you see me in the suit, right? But you can talk to me without the black robe on. But if you see me with the black robe on, it's a whole different ballgame. And there's not a lot I can do at that point because I'm required to follow what the law says. But it's my hope and understanding that if people see someone that looks like them, right, that there is at least hope or understanding that this person cares, this person understands, this person knows, or at least has heard my plight and what it could be, and that I'm not just written off or, you know, devalued because you couldn't understand the situation that I was in.
And I think that civil servant like goes beyond just the bench, right? And I think that'll be amazing if judges of all sorts were able to meet, you know, youth and other people where they are before they got to their court. What big of a difference could that make in that person's or their child's or the adults, whoever it may be, life? And you also be able to give them the realities, like, hey, look, like, you see me now, and I'm here trying to stop you from getting to. If you gonna see me in a different light, So I think that'd be powerful.
And also, too, not on some like scared straight stuff, because I think if we're dealing with people who have already experienced trauma, somebody doesn't have a mother or father, or someone is being raised by a sibling that is 3 or 4 years older, coming in them and trying to scare them is just a repeat of the trauma they've already suffered their whole life. And so, again, with this understanding that, like, you know, we're not coming in trying to scare you. I'm coming in to say that, look, I can understand and get how you've gotten here. But I will tell you this road you are on, this way you are walking will only lead to certain places, and you're not gonna like any of them. You know, what could be done? What are you missing? What are you needing? You know, that could help absolve this plan of what we've got or the way we're going. You know, because, you know, that's, again, with this, you know, trying to scare people into doing the right thing is not meeting people where they are.
Right.
You know, because, you know, if scaring folk worked, then we wouldn't be here.
Right.
So you can't scare someone to do the right thing if we don't understand the reason for the decisions they've made.
Going back to community, you're a black man. The criminal justice system hasn't treated us favorably since the history of this country. Right? Since many of us were brought over here on slave ships.
In bondage.
In bondage, shackled. How does your blackness play into your role in the criminal legal system as potential judge? And that can be from a representation standpoint, cultural competency, understanding, lived experiences, the proximity to just the dangers of being black in this country in correlation with the criminal legal system, the law enforcement.
I use it as a disarming mechanism because, you know, whether it be in Davidson County, Murfreesboro, Franklin, you know, people are going to make assumptions about the black guy coming in a suit. You know, some might presume, well, maybe I'm a lawyer, or maybe I was just smart enough to dress up for court. You know, I get that a lot. Oh, you're a lawyer? You know, yeah, I'm the lawyer. This is a briefcase,
Microaggressions.
I use it when speaking with a lot of my clients in the understanding that, you know, I'm not going to ever forget who you are. I am not telling you this information because I want to be through with your case or I want to be done. If you say that something happened that nobody would believe, you know, like an example, I've got law enforcement. I have a client who's sitting in the car with a pack of cigarettes on his lap. He told me the officer just walked up to him, reached in the car, took the cigarettes, you know, and said, "What's this?" Because there was a little packet, and it looked like it had drugs in it. My client was honest and told him it was some drugs, you know. And I remember thinking, like, man, what do you mean? He just walked up, reached inside your car, and, you know, and took it out. You know, because a lot of people are like, well, officers know not to do that. But I said, you know, this person's adamant. He said this is what happened. And again, right, because I want to highlight, you know, we're having a hearing. I asked the officer directly, I said, well, did you reach in and grab the cigarettes from the car? And he was like, yeah, I did. And I said, you didn't say who you were or, you know, going through all the illegal search and seizure stuff, you know. And so in that instance, it was eye-opening for me that, you know, while you can't believe everything a client might tell you, you should investigate or at least figure out if something did or could happen. Mm-hmm. Moreover, you know, not all law enforcement is bad, crooked, or dirty because, you know, the case ended up getting dismissed because that is a clear violation of someone's constitutional rights. But I spoke to that officer and commended them for their honesty. I commended them for, you know, being under oath and doing the right thing, which seems like a bare minimum, but, you know, I want to make sure that's highlighted so that we can encourage and continue that behavior. So, you know, how my blackness plays in, it changes every single day. Mm-hmm. The varying degrees of how it's used, whether it be from, underestimating me, right? Whether it be from, thinking that I might come in combative or because of some preconceived notion about how black men are, but it is that duality, that code that we all know about that we have to put on for certain places and spaces.
Right. And I think it's also another component to it too, especially if elected judge. We harder on each other a lot of times. And I say, oh, okay, well, Kyle, he looks like me. Okay, I got a shot, I might be going home.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't make the decision that I feel is favorable to me because I'm basing it off our blackness, not off anything else.
Yeah.
And because of that, well, Kyle ain't for black folks.
I know.
And you might have heard this before during your, in your attorney days, but that's what we do. Rightfully so, wrongfully so, that's what we do. How do you navigate? How do you balance those? Just being, sure of yourself, because it happens and it will happen.
Of course. That's such an excellent question and point. And, I will say, unfortunately, that, some, black judges are, in fact, tougher, under, I think, maybe this misguided belief that, it's a form of protection or wanting them to tough love or, making it out that like, hey, you could be where I am, but you've got to walk the walk, talk the talk. You've got to do right. And so there's this, it's okay to be, just a little bit more punitive to people that look like you. And I don't know if it's from a fear that maybe being exposed or, that if it gets out that, oh, well, you're being lenient on black people, well, you're a black person. And so what's that mean? Without ever asking the question of, okay, well, so if a white judge is lenient on white people, does that mean that equals racism?
Which our whole system says,
And so, again, going back to the audacity and the daring, I'm not going to have to telegraph what I do. I'm not going to have to say it or claim it, but I'm not going to be afraid to show mercy. I'm not going to be afraid to show leniency to someone of color simply to try to put on so that everyone can know, okay, well, because I should not have to be tougher on black people to make it appear that I'm equal for everyone, right? I don't believe that white judges are thinking, okay, well, let me make sure I'm tougher on my white people in front of me so that, it appears that I'm not lenient on them. That nexus is flawed significantly. And that's why I said, it's an 8-year term, right? What do I plan to do? I plan to do what I said. I plan to espouse the values and convictions that I believe make a just system. It will look a little different. It should look a little different. And there is no person in my pocket, there is no money I've received that could have any hold or threat or even gentle suggestion that, hey, now, Kyle, you're getting a little reckless. I'm going to do what I believe is right and not calculate or put this nexus on, well, what is, am I appearing too lenient on black people or people of color? I'm going to do what I think is right for everybody because a good judge benefits everybody that's in front of them. I talk about, I've seen what a great judge can do. Right? Whether white, black, brown, anything, a great judge can positively impact someone's life.
Accountability is a big deal, especially if you're talking about 8 years. One of the best ways I feel community can hold judges accountable is court watch. Gives community members one to kind of see what happens in the courtroom because nobody wants to just be in court, right? But other than, if you're studying, right? So if you can be there under, different circumstances where you can really evaluate, see what goes on, see different judges, see how they preside, and things like that. So do you welcome something like Court Watch?
I absolutely do. I do have to give a caveat, right?
Okay.
In that, just like in a trial, right, what you might see on TV is probably a third of what has been argued or talked about. There are certain things that must remain confidential and secret, and whether it be for the benefit of the defendant or for the benefit of the alleged victim, if there is one. I would hope for some understanding, and I think that's where the trust factor comes in. That even, because to your question about, okay, well, yeah, Kyle didn't go my way, or he did something I would have done differently. I believe most people are reasonable, right? I think that if that person is treated with respect, if that person felt heard, if that person believed that they were given the full opportunity to present their defense case, whatever you want to call it, that while they might disagree or wish that it could have gone differently, that it won't be the see there, he don't care about black people. Let's see, because the majority of the people I'm speaking with don't want handouts. They don't want favors. They just want to be treated the same as everyone else. Right. And that might appear simple, but it's not, because you have to be conscious. You have to be cognizant of it. And so a lot of times the people that feel slighted or have been made to feel less than were disrespected. They might have been spoken down to. Mm-hmm. They might have not had an opportunity to say what they needed to or wanted to. And I think that's what resonates. That's what you take away. People don't remember what was said, but people remember how they made them feel. People remember how they feel. Right. And there have been tons of times where I've been in front of judges and it didn't go my way, but I've got no beef with that judge. I have no question about whether or not were we heard, because I know we were treated with respect, dignity, and given an opportunity to present. Right. And as long as that's present, I think the system can keep going. Because, of course, I'm not going to make everybody happy. Right? That's impossible. Right. But I think I would like for everyone to be able to say, he showed me respect. Right. Everyone able to say, he showed my family respect. Right. He gave due diligence. And he cared about what he was doing and understood the impact that it's going to have on everybody involved.
And I think court watches too takes away a lot of that, if done right. Yeah. Takes away a lot of that like intimidation, right? If I know I'm an organization or I'm bringing a group in, I can let your assistant know beforehand, hey, I got this organization coming, we're gonna do court watch. Love to talk with you afterward if possible. Yeah. Right? We can do that, and if I didn't see something or don't understand something, because I might not have the full context, we can have that discussion afterwards. And some things that you might be privy to tell me or not, but there's just that level of transparency. At least maybe say, okay, well, at least I know Judge Kyle is ready to at least talk to me, and I can come in and he's gonna be transparent, and he's not gonna be like, nah, like I made my decision, I don't have time, like figure it out, right? And so I just think that's one way to build that relationship with judges, not having to be buddy, but at least being say, hey, like, I Judge Parks he'll talk with you.
Kind of sounds like you're hoping for a balance, right? Kind of hoping for some scrutiny to be understood, that like it's not just a flat out no, right. And that again, I love that example of everyone should have a shared goal. Mm-hmm. Because let me just say, yes, court watch is fine, right? It is public record. There are going to be situations and scenarios where, it might not be, and I can't even tell you why it's not. And that's where the trust and the faith in what I'm doing, I would hope can be exuded in other examples and say, okay, well, yeah, I don't like that, but he's been solid on all these other things, so it must be something that he's got to keep to himself or can't share. Right. But that idea of coming to a common ground, of wanting engagement, right? Because, the campaign has allowed me to go out and meet all of these amazing people. But I won't be able to do it as much, obviously, because I'll be working, but that's not going to stop me from still going out and meeting and engaging with all these amazing people. Right. And I think that instances like that are a wonderful way to not only blend who I am as a person, but also the work that I'm doing and the service that I'm trying to give to this county. Right.
I keep going back to this. 8 years.
Yeah, man.
It's a long time, people. It's not like 2, 4. It's not like, okay, we can get another person in there the next 2 years. No. You got 4 years, then you got another 4 to wait. What does 8 years look like with Carl Parks?
It means that it's 2030, which means I've got my first kid is in college, and my two babies are, 11 and 10. And so it is, I hope, a different world for the better. I hope that with 8 years of consistent leadership, of change, and a desire to do more, that at least for my part, I have made the system better. It looks like enough time to have been able, because one of the things that I'll say too, 8 years in the criminal defense community is a known number, because for certain felonies, that's the start of it, right? 8 years is kind of the minimum that you can get. And so I'm very intimate with just how long 8 years can be. You know, you can go to college twice in 8 years. You can have 3 Olympics in 8 years, right? And so, you know, it is not lost on me, this chunk of time. But if service is the forefront, if goodness, honor, and consistent leadership with proven results that are given time to flourish, because there will be setbacks, there will be things that don't necessarily go the way you'd envision, but an adaptability to change and a faith that what you are doing, that although might not be recognized, is good and should continue, that in 8 years from now, you know, I would have made Division III criminal court a much more cohesive place, and ingratiated in the full community of Davidson County, with an understanding that whoever comes here is going to feel safe, understood, and heard.
Cal, I want to leave you with the last words. Man, this has been awesome. But I think it's important for people to know how they can support you, find you, contact you. Talk more about some of the creative, I would say, things that you want to do in our criminal court judges here in Davidson County. So
one of the things that I really want to, as a defense attorney, I've got to find services and programs for my clients to hopefully convince a judge or district attorney that, you know, while this person might have committed this act, the way to stop that act from ever happening again, which is, I think, the ultimate goal of justice, right? Whether, you know, every victim's family I've spoken to, they want to make sure it doesn't happen to someone else, okay? If we are just locking people up and not treating or educating or in any way counseling, they're going to serve that time, they're going to get out, and they're going to do it again. Because how could they not? That's all they've known.
Sounds like you want some restorative justice.
Very, very much so. Very much so. And restorative justice as a concept is relatively new. It's been needed for a long time. But what that looks like is evolving and changing. But again, an acknowledgement of something we need. And here's the thing, too, back to the individuality of the cases. Restorative justice for this defendant and that victim might look completely different than the restorative justice for someone in a drug case where a family member was negatively affected by that. And so, or a DUI or a vehicular assault where someone is, you know.
It's not cookie cutter.
It's not, and it can't be. And I think that, you know, there's this kind of idea that justice should be able to apply to everybody, otherwise it's not just. But I think the opposite is true. I think that if we don't take the time and understanding and peel back the layers of the, you know, why, the how, the where, and the who, then, you know, we'll go back to easy, or we'll go back to simple, you know, because I can understand how that concept got started, but saying it in reality, it's just proof that that doesn't work. It can't work.
So how can people reach out, support you? get in contact
Yes,
with
sir.
you, all of that good stuff.
Well, let me start. Campaign number is 615-200-7345. My website is www.voteforkyleparks.com. I'm on Facebook, Kyle Parks for Judge, Instagram, Vote Kyle Parks for Judge. But please, engage with me, call me, contact me, ask me whatever question you've got, because this is the best time that I can communicate. This is the best time that I'd be able to reach and answer questions. Look me up, scrutinize me. I hope, do your research, do your whatever you need to make this decision. The election starts April 13th to the 28th for early voting, and the big day is May 3rd. There are a lot of qualified people on this ballot. I encourage you to look them all up, because it's not just me running. These elections will have more of an impact on your life than any presidential race or even every Senate race, because these are the people that you could see or your family could see.
Right.
So it's important.
And if you don't like something that Kyle did, you can always see him in Kroger's or Publix, and you can't do that with the president.
Right. You're not
you can't
gonna
do
see
that with the
Joe
Senate.
Biden.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, but you might see Kyle.
There you go.
In the fruit section.
That's
you know
right.
What I'm saying? Like, hold on.
Right. Like, what's up, man? Yeah, like what's up?
What's going on?
Yeah.
Right. But Kyle, man, I appreciate this time. I appreciate you really sharing with us your really creative ways and courageous ways and thoughts and perspectives about where our criminal legal system could potentially go, what it could potentially look like, what you want it to look like. Yeah. And I think that's what people should want to know and should want to hear from our candidates. Again, 8 years, almost a decade. And so this is crucial. So I encourage people to go out there, do your research, not only after this interview, after you see this and look at this, and learn more about Kyle. So thanks, Kyle.
You. And I do have one more thing I want to say.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so Deep Dish Conversations, where is the pizza? Like we've got this really nice setup. I see he's got all the instruments, but you get me on here, we got people speaking to pizza. I got pizza right here. And just so no pizza for the candidates, that's cool. I get it. I was told there would be pizza. Okay, it's not in here.
I'm gonna make this clear, right? So look. So we have this segment. This was a perspective segment, okay. And then we have our Deep Dish Conversation season.
There we go.
The season is where we have the pizza.
Okay.
And then this
interview.
Okay.
So sounds like I might need to be back for the season.
You need to be back for the season.
Get some of this pizza.
And then you can have free pizza, right?
Work.
But hey.
That's good.
They owe me hard about this pizza.
I'm telling you, bro.
But,
thank you, man.
Man, no, thank you. Great. No, this has been awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Till next time.
Man. Dope. All right.